Fatherhood isn't easy, but in Autismland, it's a journey like no other. Join Mark de Grasse as we explore the highs, lows, and everything in between of raising children on the autism spectrum. With real stories, practical advice, and a touch of humor, we're here to navigate this unique journey together. For dads navigating life on the autism spectrum, you're not alone.
Hey dads, I'm Mark de Grasse, and you're listening to the Dads and Autismland podcast, where we try to have an honest discord about what it's like to raise kids with autism. Now, today we have another kind of touchy subject. I'm going to be talking about how to handle trolls. If you don't know what a troll is, if you're an autism dad, you definitely know. Somebody who's being disrespectful or ignorant when it comes to your autistic kiddos and the situation that you're going through. So I've dealt with some trolls, both in person and online. Most recently on our YouTube channel for this podcast specifically, I had somebody write in like a diatribe of how it was basically disrespectful and wrong for me to take my autistic son on a airplane, since he won't wear headphones and he plays the same track, or not even track. It's just a simple like 5 to 10 second scene for monsters over and over again. I've actually described it in past podcasts where I said that, we always, tell the staff of the airplane, we tell the airline, we tell everybody around us about the situation we're going through, and simply, ask for, permission. I also, if they need throwing in there, I always say it's either he does this or he yells the whole time. But the troll that I'm talking about was basically saying that, it'd be better for everyone's mental health if I kept my son at home, like somebody in her family who I guess doesn't travel ever. And that kind of got me on the topic of like, okay, well, how do you handle these trolls? So what I'm going to talk about is, kind of why trolls exist, understanding them, and, some of the situations that we've been through and kind of how we handled it. It's a very unique situation. It's not like any other situation I've ever been in, because there's so many consequences to what you're doing, and the understanding level of people who are you're interacting with might be so low that there's no way you can even connect them with the situation that's actually happening. And some of them honestly seem to be special needs as far as I can tell. And that's actually one way I've started to look at some of these very angry people who, honestly, it seems inappropriate for them in many times to be upset with us. But anyways, I digress a little bit. So I'm going to talk, and again, this is just my personal experience. I'm not a professional at conflict resolution. I'm just a dad who has to deal with it sometimes because, my son's autistic, and, there's situations that arise, or there's just content we're posting online and people get upset about it because they think it's wrong that autistic people act that way. For you dads out there listening to this, you're probably like, you get it. And you've probably been furious before, but let's just try to understand the trolls first. And a troll is just anybody being negative, specifically because of something that your autism family is doing, or maybe your just autistic child is doing. So I kind of break them into three groups. The uninformed, the people who don't understand autism, and sometimes there are some older generations that'll be like, "When I was a kid, you would get the belt," and they think that you could just beat your kids into submission, and they don't even understand that the mental capacity issues, or not the capacity, but the mental challenges that your kid faces, it won't allow them to behave normally, which is kind of offensive, the whole normal thing in and of itself. You also have the judgmental people who think they know better than you as a parent, or somebody who, and you probably heard this a lot of times, knows somebody with autism or babysat somebody with autism, and they don't know exactly how you should be handling the situation. And then you just have some cruel people who are just mean, and a lot of times even that kind of goes into more of the uninformed, because a lot of of times you'll get kids that'll say things that are off. They'll laugh at them, maybe, which is infuriating if you're a dad. But those say those three groups. So uninformed, judgmental, and then your cruel people. And kind of, those are the people we're going to have to deal with, or you have dealt with. You also have, the reasons why they don't. So a lot of times they don't understand. They're projecting their own insecurities, or perhaps, on the internet, they could, be cruel for whatever reason, and they have some anonymity, which allows them to, I don't know, get their fix if there's some kind of narcissist. But, for us personally, it is exhausting. You want to be like, I'm bigger than that, or I've dealt with this before, so it doesn't hurt me. And it usually does. If nothing else, it's just emotionally draining. Like, we have to deal with a lot, and then you also have to deal with ignorance on top of that. Somebody else's issues too, just because of your issues that you're handling. It causes a little bit of self-doubt. As a parent, you're like, am I doing the right thing? Did I handle that situation right? And then, honestly, it's just distracting, where it's taking away from your care for your child, your care for your family, for yourself, is all better use of your energy than dealing with this person, or educating this person who has an issue with you. So just a couple stories. I think one of the worst ones actually came from my hometown. We went to this restaurant with a few family members in California. And my son, he makes this loud noise. He'll just go and sometimes he is doing it on purpose. He does do it if we're behind certain groups. He'll just be like and then everyone like jumps, and I think he gets a kick out of that. This is just speculation because he hasn't said that, but sometimes he does do it on purpose. But in this case, he was just excited, and when he gets excited, he'll also make a loud noise. And for some reason at this restaurant, there were like 3 different tables that were looking at us and saying, "Could you keep him quiet?" Which has never happened. We live in Texas now. We've been here for about 10 years. It's never happened here. But there it was incredible. They just all turned around and said, "Can you keep him quiet?" And we said, "He's autistic," which, we don't get upset right off the bat. We're usually like, "Oh, they're just uninformed." Let's just inform. He has autism, doesn't have a lot of behavior control all the time. We do our best. And, that's just what we have to deal with. And then if it escalates, then that's a different issue, and usually we'll tell we'll just go to the manager and say, "Hey, he's autistic, can't help it, he's handicapped." And most of the time people back off it then. And again, I'm sure this happens a little bit more than I realize in terms of the reaction to it. But I try to stay cool as much as possible. I try to inform them. And especially the ones that are angry, I'll say he has autism, he can't control that, and I'll try to inform. And then after that, I usually ignore, and I'm good at that, ignoring things going on around me. But it's my best course of action. And the problem is, you'll have a lot of people like, "Well, you should punch him in the nose or something." And as an autism father, you can't do that. It's not responsible to react unless it's totally warranted, like somebody's attacking your child and you have to defend them. Of course, do what you got to do. But in most circumstances, like escalating a conflict, or getting to a point where a physical altercation is going to happen, is just not a good response. So I try to cool off myself. I have my breathing drills, your count to 10, deep breaths, and some other coping mechanisms. But a lot of times, like I just tend to focus. So I focus more on my child and try to ignore, the other things going around me. In this situation, you will have other people step up for you, which I think is the ideal scenario as a autism family. And maybe that sounds weak or whatever. Don't care. It's again, I'm always thinking of the legal consequences of my actions. And so I have to think like, no matter how upset I get, it's not worth any kind of, any kind of altercation that could lead to an escalation, because I have to be there for my son and my family. So I can't go to jail because somebody was maybe upset because they didn't understand what was happening. And we've never gotten to that point. So that's good. And then, it just the ones that we deal with sometimes online, just the trolls of people educating us about how we should be raising our children. Most of the time I ignore it. In this case, and you may have seen it if you're on our Facebook page, I just screenshot and posted this comment, because I do want to bring it to attention, because a lot of times you feel like, I don't know, invalidated just by ignoring it completely. And I'm like, I kind of see it as my job with this show to kind of share these stories and my feelings about them, so that you as a dad, can feel validated, because it just pisses you off. There's nothing you could do about it. And the stuff that this troll said, recently, it was just like, my family, somebody who doesn't even have an autistic child, but there's an autistic person in the family. And then this poor child is stuck in their house because they're not allowed to travel because it upsets people when they travel. And for you, and again, it's all these situations are unique, but I would never let that stop me from taking my child on an experience, is other people being unhappy because he's disturbing their experience. For a lot of people, I'm like, you know what, you get every second of every day to have your experience, and to rob my own child of it because it disturbs you for a minute, when technically this is our life, is so offensive. But it's good because a lot of people just don't realize that. And again, just getting the word out there and saying, hey, there's a million different ways to deal with this. But that's just a couple situations, and I don't like delving into all of the situations. But again, for me personally, like I tend to I'm always focused on my son when we're around, especially out in public, and so it makes it easy for me to ignore. And honestly, when he does the trying to scare large groups of people walking in front of him, it is kind of funny. Just from a prankster perspective. And that's how my son is. And again, Damien, if you haven't heard on previous shows, is a nonverbal, severely autistic mentality of a 2 or 3 year old child. And that's what kids do. What are you gonna do? Anyways, so that's how I handle it. Here's some other ways. Just a step-by-step procedure, if you like. I like my procedures. Recognize and categorize. So before you go immediately 1 to 10 in the upsetness scale, try to understand the situation. A lot of these times, especially with your Karens or very aggressive people who are trying to control their entire environment, I usually recognize them as having their own mental issues. And so I try not to discriminate. Hey, that person has mental health issues too. I will understand what they're going through right now and give them, a little grace. Don't engage. Again, silence is not bad. And it can be frustrating because you do see people getting irritated. They're looking over, and you're kind of like, I know that person is staring at me and judging me, and it can be hard. But again, refocus on your child. Doesn't matter. Or you don't have to respond, but you can't just stare back. It's you just give them back their own medicine is not a bad way. Say, I see you, I understand you're upset, without actually saying anything. A lot of those times, those people, get back to their own business. Manage your emotions is another one. Just check yourself, take a deep breath. You're a mature, awesome individual. It's really not hurting you. And a lot of times, even with my son Damien, and he can sense that sometimes if it's really blatant, but a lot of times he's not even noticing it, so it doesn't affect him too much. So it's good to recognize your child's emotion and maybe just mirror it just for the time being, especially if they're able to ignore what's going on. Educate when possible. If it does come down to it, and I have said this where it's, especially if he freaks out somebody, I'm like, hey, he's autistic. I think our last trip to California, we actually drove, and in one of the bathrooms, I think it was at McDonald's or something, we're in the bathroom. I did it, and this older man, like, oh, he stares. I'm like, he's autistic, can't control it. Went through the whole explanation. Guy was still grumpy, and I was like, oh, well, what am I going to do about it? Like, and you're kind of like, damn it, do it again. No, he didn't do it again. It was fine. And then again, and this is all kind of the same thing. Focus on what matters. Your kids, what matters. And so if you could just think in terms of what's best for my child right now, even if you're fantasizing about, justice and making people really learn what they've done wrong. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, like, you can't go to jail. You can't get arrested. You definitely don't want to involve, authorities like that, because they might not understand the situation either. So a lot of times I think that de-escalation and, just being, aware is the best way to be. And then again, refocusing your attention on your child, which makes a big difference. So yeah, I mean, It's hard. And if you have gone through this, I think people have gone through way worse than us. But it's always been a concern of ours. I probably described it before, but my son Damien's going to be much larger than me. I'm about 6'2" and 200 pounds, which sounds relatively good size. But my son's going to be like 300 pounds and like 6'5", and he's already 175 pounds at 12. So he's going to be bigger than me. And so our thought process, especially when we got into the types of therapy that we do, was always like, okay, how could this help him in situations where, the authorities might get involved? If he's a 6'5", 300-pound guy, that's also very strong. He's not, he eats a lot. And so you have to think like, how would they handle the situation if he's not responding to their commands? If he is yeah, acting violently? He doesn't usually do that, but you never know. He breaks things sometimes. And so you have to think like, okay, how would I handle that situation? And I think the best approach is always going to be calm, clarification is how I would handle it. Like, hey, let me inform everybody, control the situation, and move forward. And so that's it's just a shift in your mindset. The trolls in the big picture don't matter at all. If they're that blatantly ignorant that they can't even control themselves, then you anything you could say to them isn't going to change their perspective most of the time. There are some people where it's like, maybe they pop off like control your child just because they think you're a crummy parent or something. And that would be, sometimes you want to do that. And especially sometimes you see neurotypical kids and they're bouncing off the walls and breaking things at somewhere. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person's not controlling their child. If you kind of, think about those situations, then you get a little bit more understanding of how somebody might feel if they are just ignorant. And again, if you could just qualify them in the first place, it helps quite a bit. And again, I think telling the stories is good too. A lot of times and sometimes you'll post a story like, I can't believe somebody did this, and somebody will side with the bad side, and you'll be like, what the heck is wrong with you too? But a lot of times just sharing the story. And if you can't share it with your neurotypical family or friends, then you got this community. So, it's no reason to hold it in. And you can be frustrated with us. I mean, I'm sharing this on this podcast episode specifically because I think it's healthy to let it out. This was frustrating. This was unfair, and just acknowledge that because it is. You could say it's not. Oh, I shrugged that stuff off. Yeah, maybe you do. But a lot of times it's still good to talk to somebody else who's dealt with it and find out what they do too. And that's, one of the primary reasons we did this show was because I'm hoping to get new techniques for dealing with this kind of stuff. But if we don't share this, then we can't learn from each other. And so I'm hoping to be an example here of, how to deal with the negativity in a effective way, but also a productive way for your long-term mental health, because this kind of stuff can weigh down on you. I mean, it hurts as a parent. It hurts as a friend of your child. It hurts. It's seeing anybody else having it happen too. Like it hurts. And the thing that I don't want more than anything is for these kids to be, or just adults, whoever's autistic, to be isolated because of it, because that's what ends up happening is like, oh, we don't want to disturb the peace, and so I'm going to lock my child in a room, or I'm never going to leave the house, or this kind of stuff. And I'm sure there are situations that warrant like you can't go places, but I think I always say, hey, you should, as much as possible, take them out, because it's not just for your child either. It's also for everybody else to see autistic people and see other ways of people living. Because if you don't, then that situation that they have never been exposed to, they are going to react badly. They're never going to learn. And honestly, some of the people who are the biggest perpetrators of this could have autistic children in the future, or they could have autistic grandchildren, and then you definitely don't want them to alienate their own family members or friends because they still don't understand autism because they never had to see it. So I see it as kind of a responsibility to, for me personally, to get my child out there so people can see that this is, a different way to live. And he's a super happy guy. That's why I'm always like, I don't really care about what you are, because my son's happy most of the time. And so just imagine you could be like him for a day. like happy. Man, he could be so relaxed and content sometimes that I'm like, wow, that's amazing to be like that instead of deal with your own, internal dialogue of everything that happens and could happen and will, all these other situations we constantly think about. Some of these autistic kids don't have to do that, which is, I think, incredible. So again, I encourage you to, go outdoors with your kids, explore Autismland outside. I like going to parks and anything there where there's noise. We actually just started taking my son to basketball games, and he stands up and he yells, and he just has a blast. And so I think depending on your situation, say I was talking about my son being hyposensitive or craves input. If you do have a hypersensitive child, then you might have to do something else, or maybe even put on headphones in order to go outside. But figure it out. And just try. You'd be shocked. I'm always shocked. I mean, the basketball game thing like threw me for a loop. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a whole new world. I'm not even a big fan of basketball all the time, but I'm like, hey, I'll go to all the basketball games if I could bring my autistic son with me. Like, this is incredible. We could do another thing, which is amazing. But you have to keep on trying. And I will say that I think now that we're getting him out more, like it is good. It's great for him, and I think it's going to allow him to go to even more places. So if you are dealing with trolls, sorry about that, but thank you for keeping your cool. It's the best for your family. It's the best for your mental health too. And if you do need to vent and, just talk about it, then talk to us, talk to the community. Honestly, like I will talk to you directly. Just send me an email and we'll figure out a time to talk, because that's what I, like to do, and I think need to do. I think we all need to do that sometimes. So don't be afraid to open up about it, because your feelings are 100% valid. And there's nothing wrong with being upset about it. Like it'd be weird if you weren't really upset about it, if you want to think about it that way. So open up, talk about it. Any tips you have for dealing with it, share with the community, and just let us know. Keep talking. That's what I do all the time. All right, so that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're a dad, you're not alone. Keep talking to us, and be sure to subscribe and tell your friends about it if they're going through a similar situation. We really want to connect with everybody who has autistic kids, and as dads especially, and we're here for you. So tune back in very soon.